When you reach 68, you start counting trust like money. You only spend it when you have to. I had enough saved for a quiet life. Most mornings began the same way. The kettle clicked on at 6:30. The same dull metallic pop it had made for 15 years. I'd wait for the first hiss of steam, then pour it over the same chipped mug with the faded blue line around the rim. Ellen used to call it the honest cup, ugly but loyal. I never could throw it out. I read the paper while the house warmed up, not because I cared about the news, but because I liked the sound of it, the faint rustle of printed pages. These days, everything else was silent. The clock over the sink ticked like a metronome, steady and judgmental. After breakfast, I'd walk to the beach. It was only 4 blocks down, but it took me 20 minutes, knees like old hinges, sand sticking in the seams of my shoes. The air off the Pacific smelled of rust and salt, sharp enough to make you remember you were alive. Some mornings a woman with a white dog passed me on the trail. She always said, "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" even when it wasn't. I'd nod, adjust my cap, keep walking. You get used to politeness without conversation. It's a skill, the slow art of existing quietly. The ocean had become my clock. Low tide meant coffee. High tide meant dinner. The gulls were my company. Their arguments were familiar enough to be comforting. Inside, my little house held the weight of years. Everything was still where Ellen had left it. The ceramic lighthouse on the mantel, the lemon polish under the sink, her recipe box full of cards written in her careful, slanted hand. I kept her handwriting like some people keep relics, proof of something once sacred and now extinct. The neighbors called it a cozy place. I called it insulation. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt padded, protective. After 6 years without Ellen, I'd stopped expecting voices. But sometimes in the middle of the night, I'd wake and hear the faint clink of the wind chime outside. Ellen had hung it there the summer before she passed, saying, "If you ever miss me, listen for the wind." The sound still came, but I didn't call it comfort, more like maintenance. The wind doing what the living forget to do. Every month I'd go through the same ritual. Open the bank statement, check the numbers, file it under a labeled tab in a drawer marked household. There were folders for everything. Taxes, medical, Ellen fund. She'd wanted that last one to go toward a nursing scholarship at the community college. For the girls who stay up all night studying so they can take care of people like me, she'd said once, laughing. The money sat there still, 60-odd thousand, untouched, earning almost nothing. I used to tell myself I was waiting for the right time, but really I was afraid to close the drawer. It felt like closing a chapter that hadn't finished reading me yet. In the afternoons, I repaired small things. The hinge on the pantry door, the drawer that stuck, the light fixture in the hallway that flickered even after I'd changed a bulb. Little rituals of control in a life that had shrunk to routine. By evening, I'd pour a small bourbon, sit on the porch, and watch the sun drop behind the gray water. Sometimes I'd talk to Ellen's photo, just a few words, out of habit, not belief. "You'd hate the way they build houses now," I told her once. "All glass and angles. Nothing meant to last." The phone rang maybe once a week, usually wrong numbers, sometimes a telemarketer selling solar panels. I let the machine answer. But that Thursday, it didn't sound like a stranger's call. The ring felt heavier, deliberate, like it was meant for me. I picked it up without thinking. "Dad," a bright voice said. "It's me, Melissa." Her name came through the line, like static and memory combined. My daughter. It had been months since we'd spoken, polite texts on holidays. The kind that say we're fine, you're fine. Let's not make it complicated. "Melissa," I said. "Well, this is a surprise." She laughed too quickly. "Oh, Dad, it's a good one, I promise." Trent, and I finally found the right property. And just like that, the quiet life I'd been guarding like a savings account began to spend itself. "Dad," she said, her voice stretched thin with enthusiasm. "Trent and I finally found the right property. A flip in Beaverton 3 bedrooms, big backyard, good bones. It's an incredible opportunity. We just need a short-term loan to close. Her words landed fast, bright, rehearsed, like someone had written them on cue cards. How much is short-term? I asked. She hesitated. That tiny pause you learn to hear after 60 years of listening for subtext. 50,000. Maybe 60 to be safe. But we'll pay it back within 3 months tops. It's just until Trent's commission clears. 60,000. I almost laughed. The last time someone had asked me for that kind of money, it was a mortgage broker in 1983. While she talked, I looked at the framed photo on the shelf, me, Ellen, and Melissa on her high school graduation day. Ellen had made her a necklace out of tiny silver beads. Melissa had called it old lady jewelry. Now, all these years later, she wanted $60,000, the kind of sum Ellen and I had once saved for 10 years to scrape together a down payment. Melissa, I said, that's not pocket change. I know, Dad, but this deal is special. Trent says the property's undervalued by at least $100K. We'd pay you interest, of course. 5%? 10 if you want. It's an investment in family. Investment in family. That phrase sat on the line like bait on a hook. I could almost hear Trent whispering behind her. That smooth salesman baritone I'd always distrusted. Tell him it's safe, I imagined him saying. Tell him it's temporary. The longer she spoke, the more my sense of caution thinned out, thread by thread. It wasn't the numbers that swayed me. It was the way she said Dad. Soft, needy. The same tone she used when she was 7, and I was fixing the chain on her bike. I'll think about it, I said. Please, Dad, she breathed. Closing's Monday. We just need to wire the funds by Friday. I'll send you all the details. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long while. The gulls screamed somewhere beyond the dunes. The house seemed smaller than it had that morning. I poured a bourbon and opened my old financial folder. The one Ellen had labeled Household Core. Each tab had her handwriting. Utilities, taxes, emergency fund. Her neat cursive steadied me, like lines on graph paper. I found the envelope marked Ellen Fund. Inside were the papers from the community college foundation we'd once contacted about her scholarship idea for nursing students with financial hardship. Ellen had dreamed of signing it the summer she fell ill. I traced her handwriting with my thumb. Then I closed the folder and placed it back in the drawer. That night, sleep came slow. I kept thinking about Melissa at 10 years old, elbows on the kitchen counter, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth as she counted change from her lemonade stand. She'd once written, I owe you 25 cents on a napkin when she borrowed from my wallet. I still had it somewhere. That was the last debt she ever repaid in full. At 8 a.m., her email arrived. A clean message with no greeting, just numbers and instructions. Account name, Trent and Melissa Holdings, LLC. Routing hashtag, 066000437. Account hashtag, 5418322094. It looked professional, secure, too polished for desperation. I stared at the screen, reading the words until they blurred. Engineers like clarity. But that morning, I wanted faith more than precision. I logged into my bank. The website banner showed a couple on a sailboat with the caption, Make your money move. I nearly laughed at the irony. My fingers hovered over the keys. The site asked confirm transfer. I clicked yes. A loading circle spun like a coin tossed in the air. Then it was done. $60,000 gone in less than a minute. I printed the receipt, checked the ink before it dried, and slid the paper into a new folder marked Melissa. Loan April 2023. Old habits. Engineers keep ledgers even for heartbreak. At noon, Melissa called again, her voice bubbling like champagne. You're amazing, Dad. We'll take you out to dinner next week. Our treat. You'll see. This deal will change everything. I said, I'm sure it will. We hung up. I stared at the quiet phone. Outside, the tide was out, the sand dark and rippled. The gulls were diving again. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd done something meaningful, like the universe might still connect kindness with outcome. Ellen would have said, "You did the right thing, Harold. Family first." Maybe. But Ellen was the kind of person who believed people meant what they said. I took the receipt from a folder, looked at the numbers again, 6 digits precise and cold, then slipped it back under the lamp. Somewhere in the house, the wind chime moved, a soft metallic ring, like distant applause. I wanted to believe it was a sign, but part of me already knew it was a warning. For the first week, I lived on updates. They came like weather reports, quick, sunny, unreliable. We're in escrow. Trent's got contractors lined up. This is really happening. Every message ended with exclamation marks. Like joy was something you could prove through punctuation. I read them twice each morning, as if enthusiasm might mature into accountability if I stared long enough. I kept a printed receipt of the wire transfer on my desk, next to the photograph of Ellen in her garden hat. The contrast was almost comical. Her soft smile beside a line of bank digits. One human, one transaction. Both gone too soon. I try not to check my phone every hour, but habit has gravity. By the third day, I'd memorized the last 4 digits of the transfer confirmation number. It felt like a prayer disguised as data. The house was quieter than usual. I found myself cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, scrubbing the grout between the kitchen tiles, relining the silverware drawer with new paper. The drawer looked perfect afterward. Pristine, useless. That was how waiting felt, a kind of tidiness you couldn't live in. On Thursday, I drove into town to buy groceries. The cashier, a young man with half-dyed hair, asked if I wanted to sign up for the store's Seniors Rewards program. I told him I already had one. It was called Patience. He didn't laugh. They rarely do. I bought salmon, potatoes, a small bottle of bourbon. I told myself I'd open it when Melissa repaid the loan. A quiet toast to closure, maybe even pride. That bottle sat unopened for a long time. By the second week, the update slowed. Her texts grew shorter. Busy week. Can't talk, inspections today. The punctuation stayed cheerful, but the tone thinned out like watered paint. When I asked for a repayment schedule, she said, "Trent's handling all the numbers. He's amazing with logistics." Amazing? Yes, that was the problem. Men like Trent are always amazing until they're gone. Still, I believed her, or pretended to. Belief, I discovered, is easier than confrontation when the person owes you both money and love. Ellen used to warn me about that. She once said, "You can't build a bridge out of excuses, Harold. They don't carry weight." I'd laugh then, but now her words felt like steel under my ribs. April bled into May. The evenings turned colder, the wind sharper. I started taking longer walks by the water just to hear something louder than my own thinking. The ocean was constant, wild, indifferent, dependable. When I got home, I'd make coffee and open Facebook. I'd never been much for social media, but Melissa posted often, and that was where her life unfolded, curated, golden, untouched by delay or debt. There she was one morning, standing on a patio with a glass of wine. The caption reading, "Here's to new beginnings." Another photo showed her at brunch, candles, laughter, a man in a tailored jacket pouring champagne. I scrolled down to the caption, "Small rewards for big steps." Small. That word stuck like a splinter. I closed the laptop, then opened it again. Maybe I'd misread it. Maybe it wasn't new. Maybe it was an old picture recycled. But the background, the Mariner's table, the restaurant Ellen and I had visited for our 40th anniversary, was unmistakable. Even the tablecloth pattern was the same. I remembered the bill from that night, $142, which we considered indulgent. I couldn't imagine what dinner cost now, but I could guess whose card paid for it. The next morning, I sent 3 polite messages. Glad to see the project's going well. When should we expect repayment? Need to discuss the timeline for the loan. Please confirm you received these. No reply. I waited another day, then called. Straight to voicemail. "Hi, it's Dad," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hope all's well. Just checking in about the 60,000. I'm not rushing you, but I need to plan my finances." Still nothing. The following evening, I called Trent. He picked up on the second ring. And, "Hey there. Been meaning to call you back. We're swamped, man. Deals everywhere." "I can imagine," I said. "Listen about the loan." The Beaverton place. All good news. We just had to move the funds around a bit for tax reasons. You'll get your return soon. Promise." Soon meaning when? He chuckled. "You can't rush these things, Henry. Money in real estate moves like tides. It flows. It always comes back." That metaphor was almost impressive, if it hadn't been so rehearsed. "You know," I said slowly, "I spent 40 years studying tides. They follow laws, predictable ones. Maybe you could send me the numbers." Silence. Then his voice again, smoother now. "You're overthinking this, old man. We've got it under control." I hung up before I said what I wanted to. That night, the wind chime rang again, sharp, insistent. I stared out at the ocean, black and restless, and realized the silence I'd built around myself all these years wasn't insulation anymore. It was echo. Every absence had a sound if you waited long enough. Ellen's empty chair, the unanswered phone. Even trust, when it runs out, makes kind of noise, a faint internal click, like a lock turning the wrong way. I sat there until the bourbon went warm in my hand, listening to it. That was the night I stopped calling alone. By mid-May, I'd stopped waiting for apologies. Hope, I realized, was more expensive than the loss itself. It cost sleep, dignity, and the illusion that family meant safety. So I did what engineers do when something collapses. I studied the failure. I started with the paperwork, the printed receipt of the wire transfer, the email header from Trent and Melissa Holdings, LLC, the text messages that ended in silence, all laid out on my dining room table like evidence from a crime scene no one else knew had happened. The table lamp hummed faintly. My hands shook a little as I highlighted each line. Date, time, confirmation number. I wasn't angry yet. I was methodical. Anger comes later, after the data lines up. I created a new folder in my file drawer and labeled it in block letters. M&T Harris Loan, $60,000. I printed 2 copies of everything and placed one set in Ellen's old cedar box, the one that used to hold her jewelry. It seemed fitting. Trust, like gold, deserves a container. The next morning, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked in the search bar like an impatient heartbeat. Trent and Melissa Holdings, LLC, Oregon. Nothing. I tried variations, T&M Holdings, Melissa Harris Beaverton Real Estate. Still nothing official. Only LinkedIn profiles full of motivational quotes and beach photo avatars. Then, by accident, I entered Trent Holdings, LLC. There it was, filed 6 months earlier. Registered under Trent C. Harris, owner and agent. Melissa's name nowhere in sight. I printed the screen, drew a neat red line under owner, Trent C. Harris, and wrote in the margin, not joint, not family. The first tremor of anger rippled under my ribs. Small, controlled, the kind of vibration a bridge feels before it breaks. By noon I'd made up my mind. I called Janet Lewis, retired attorney, sharp as glass, one of the few people who still sent real Christmas cards. She'd handled Ellen's estate after the funeral. She answered on the second ring. "Harold, haven't heard that voice in ages. How's the ocean treating you?" "Restless," I said. "Listen, Janet, I need your advice. Family and money, the worst combination." She sighed softly. "Tell me everything from the beginning." So I did. Every promise, every missing reply, every clever metaphor about tides and returns. I could almost see her expression through the phone. Eyebrows arched, lips pressed into a thin, professional line. When I finished, she said quietly, "Harold, I'm going to tell you something you won't like. You didn't lend your daughter money. You gifted it. Unless there's a written loan agreement or acknowledgement of debt, there's no enforceable claim. I stared at the grain of the wooden table. So she can just walk away? Legally, yes. Morally, no. Morality doesn't pay interest, I muttered. Janet chuckled. The sound dry but kind. No, but it earns peace. So the real question is, do you want revenge or restitution? I thought about it. Both. A pause. Then start collecting. Paper doesn't forget. People do. That night, the house was soaked in rain. It tapped against the windows like fingers asking to be let in. I brewed coffee at midnight and sat down at my desk. Page by page, I built my archive. Wire receipts, text screenshots, copies of Melissa's emails, even the empty message bubbles, absence is proof. Each page slipped into the folder with a clean, final click. Engineers trust noise. It tells us where the structure weakens. In silence, I'd found the crack. Around 2 a.m., while checking a public real estate database, I saw it. Beaverton, 3BR/2BA, purchased April 10th for $280,000. Sold June 3rd for $395,000. Profit, $115,000. I wrote beneath it in pencil. Return on investment, 0. Return of pride, pending. The next morning, I called Janet again. You said I have no claim, I told her. What if I make one? On what grounds? Fraudulent misrepresentation. I read carefully from an article I'd printed at dawn. She laughed softly. You've been studying. I'm remembering who I am. You used to call me the man who measures twice. Well, measure carefully, she said. Fraud's hard to prove, but tax evasion isn't. If they used unreported capital, the IRS would love to meet them. Then maybe I'll introduce them. After we hung up, I opened a new notebook, graph-ruled, because engineers hate chaos. On the first page, I wrote in capital letters, plan. Then I numbered each step like a schematic. 1. Gather full documentation. 2. Confirm property sale profit. 3. Contact IRS tip line anonymously. 4. Attend next family event. Confront publicly. 5. Do not shout. Speak like an engineer. Clear, precise, unbreakable. I underlined the last line twice. Then I closed the notebook and slid it beside the folder. For the first time in months, I felt something close to calm. Not peace. That was still a luxury. But control. The same quiet satisfaction I used to feel when a bridge test passed the final load check. The tremor stopped. The structure held. By dawn, the rain had cleared. The air smelled of salt and wet earth. I stood by the window with my coffee and watched the sky lighten over the Pacific. Somewhere hundreds of miles north, my daughter was sleeping beside a man who thought charm could replace character. I didn't pity them. I measured them. And for the first time since Ellen died, I had work to do. Melissa's 40th birthday arrived in late August, a date I would have ignored if not for Janet's reminder. You want the truth, Harold? Confrontation makes liars trip over their own stories. The invitation came by email, not from her, but from a catering company. You're invited to celebrate Melissa Harris. 40 and fabulous. Black tie optional venue. The Pullwood Ballroom. Portland Point 7:00 p.m. I almost deleted it. Then I looked at the folder on my desk, 2 inches thick, labeled in my own steady hand, and realized this was the test load, the final stress point in structure. The bridge was ready to be walked on, or to break. I took the 11:40 train north. The ride along the coast was quiet, the ocean on one side and endless pine on the other. I brought one small briefcase, black leather, scuffed, the same one I'd carried to design meetings in the 80s. Inside, copies of wire receipts, property records, screenshots, and a single printed email from the Oregon Secretary of State's office. Proof, in neat chronological order. The train rocked gently. Outside the window, The horizon tilted with every turn, as if the world were trying to balance itself. When we pulled into Portland, the air smelled like rain and exhaust, expensive cologne for a city that used to smell of lumber and steel. A short cab ride took me to the Pullwood, one of those polished glass hotels that try to look timeless by pretending the past never happened. The parking lot glittered with Teslas and leased Range Rovers. Music leaked from the open doors, smooth jazz, the kind that sounds expensive because it avoids commitment. I adjusted my tie navy blue, the one Ellen had bought me for our 35th anniversary, and walked inside. The ballroom was bright with chandeliers and ambition. White roses on every table. Waiters in black vests carried trays of champagne flutes that glowed like tiny lanterns. I felt out of place, but not unwelcome, the way a ghost might feel at his own memorial. Then I saw her. Melissa stood near the stage, radiant in gold satin, her hair swept up, diamonds at her ears. She was laughing, that same laugh from childhood, though polished now for an audience. Trent hovered nearby, tuxedo perfect, drink in hand, performing success like a man auditioning for himself. When she noticed me, surprise flashed across her face, followed by a brittle smile. "Dad, you came." "I did," I said. "Didn't want to miss the milestone." She hugged me, stiff and perfunctory, the kind of embrace that says we're being watched. "Trent," she said brightly, "look who's here." Trent turned, mask already in place. "Well, if it isn't the man of the hour. Harold, great to see you. Can I get you a drink?" "I brought my own," I said quietly, tapping the briefcase. He didn't get the joke. Dinner was served in courses. Roasted duck with cherry glaze, asparagus with truffle oil, miniature lemon tarts no bigger than a coin. Around me, laughter rose and fell like a metronome. Across the table, Trent entertained a cluster of men in tailored suits, all handshakes and buzzwords. Melissa glowed under their compliments, her bracelets catching the light with every gesture. I barely touched my food. My appetite had been replaced by an engineer's focus. Observe, record, wait for the right load to apply pressure. At 8:45, the lights dimmed. Trent tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth as butter on polished glass. 40 years of brilliance, beauty, and business savvy. My incredible wife, Melissa. Applause. Melissa stepped forward, pretending humility. "Thank you, everyone. I'm so lucky to share my life with such wonderful friends and colleagues." Her voice blurred into background noise. I wasn't listening anymore. My hand rested on the latch of the briefcase. When she finished, Trent raised his glass for a toast. To success, to love, to the future. That was my cue. I stood. The sound of my chair scraping the marble floor turned more heads than the microphone had. "Mind if I say something?" I asked. Melissa froze. "Dad, you don't have to." "I insist," I said. Trent laughed lightly. "Sure, Harold, go ahead." I walked toward the stage, the briefcase in hand, each step deliberate. My pulse was steady, measured. Like a man pacing out the last span of a bridge, he designed himself. "I just wanted to tell my daughter how proud I am," I began. "Not every woman can turn $60,000 of her father's retirement savings into a six-figure real estate profit in under 3 months." The room went silent. Forks froze midair. A waiter stopped mid-step, balancing his tray like a question mark. Melissa blinked. "Dad, that's not." "And do it," I continued, "without a single thank you, without repayment, without even a phone call." I smiled faintly. "That's efficiency. That's business acumen." Trent stepped forward, voice tight. "All right, let's not make a scene." "Scene," I said. "You mean the one where you registered Trent Holdings, LLC 6 months before the joint investment? Or the one where you sold the Beaverton property for $115,000 in profit and forgot to mention it to the IRS?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "IRS?" The 3 letters that turned celebration into panic. Trent's face lost color. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do." I set the briefcase on the table and opened it. Receipts, bank transfers, public sale records, even your own Instagram post. The one caption, "Hard work pays off." It certainly did. For you. A laugh, sharp, nervous, escaped from somewhere in the crowd. Melissa's voice trembled. "Dad, please." "No," I said softly. "You used my trust like a credit line. I built bridges my whole life, Melissa. You burned this one for view." Trent muttered something about lawyers, but his voice cracked halfway through. I turned toward the guests, a field of frozen smiles and sideways glances. "Sorry for interrupting dessert," I said, "but I believe in giving gifts that mean something. Consider this one a lesson in accounting." I closed the briefcase, turned, and walked out. Behind me, chaos bloomed, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, cameras flashing. But I didn't look back. The lobby air was cool, scented with rain and perfume. I stepped outside into the night. My phone buzzed. A message from Janet. "Filed your anonymous IRS report this morning." Perfect timing. For the first time in months, I smiled, small and voluntary, clean. I crossed parking lots slowly, listening to the muffled music behind the walls, that elegant jazz still playing, the kind people dance to when they're pretending nothing's wrong. At the far end of the lot, I paused, looked back at the glowing ballroom windows, and thought of Ellen. She'd always believed justice should be quiet, like the settling of dust after a storm. The wind off the river carried the faintest scent of roses and rain. I breathed it in, exhaled, and let the night take the rest. 3 days after the party, the story made its way into the local business pages, a small column on page 7, the kind most readers skim between stock listings and mortgage ads. Harris Realty under federal review for financial irregularities. I read it while drinking black coffee at my kitchen table. The morning light came in flat and forgiving, like it had seen too much and decided not to judge. The article mentioned anonymous reports, unverified transfers between personal and business accounts, and possible tax discrepancies. No names beyond Trent's. No arrests, not yet, but enough to make his phone ring for all the wrong reasons. By noon, I received a voicemail. Melissa's voice, thin and shaking. "Dad, please call me. I know you think you're right, but this is ruining us." Ruining us. Not hurting me, not I'm sorry. Just us. Plural guilt, distributed like dividends. I deleted the message. That afternoon, Janet called. "Well," she said, "looks like our little whisper reached the right ears. IRS, State Finance, and the Real Estate Commission. They're all sniffing around that Trent's going to spend the next year in meetings he can't charm his way out of." "What about Melissa?" I asked. She'll land on her feet. The Trents off the world always fall harder than the Melissas. She was right. Melissa had always learned survival faster than decency. We spoke for another 10 minutes, mostly logistics. Then Janet said, "Soften now. You did what you had to do, Harold. Don't let anyone tell you it was revenge. It was balance." Balance. That word stayed with me long after we hung up. Engineers like balance. It's what keeps everything standing. A week later, a certified envelope arrived at my door. The handwriting on the return address was hers, small, slanted, familiar enough to make my stomach tighten. Inside, a cashier's check for $60,000 and a note printed on perfumed stationery. "Dad, I'm paying you back so we can both move on. I didn't mean for things to turn ugly. Trent made decisions I didn't understand. Please don't hate me. Melissa." No apology, just damage control in cursive. I stared at the paper until the words stopped making sense, then placed the letter beside Ellen's photograph on the mantel. Her faint smile in that picture seemed to ask, "Is that what you wanted?" I wasn't sure. The next morning, I deposited the check. The teller, A young woman with a ponytail and kind eyes smiled politely as she stamped the receipt. "Big day, Mr. Monroe?" "Just balancing accounts," I said. The following week, I opened the old file drawer marked Ellen Fund. The paper inside had yellowed slightly around the edges. Her handwriting on a sticky note still read, "Nursing students. Local. Real need." I read that note several times before picking up the phone. The woman at the Community College Foundation sounded surprised. "Yes, Mr. Monroe, we do accept private donations. How much did you have in mind?" "70,000, I said. 60 from an old mistake, 10 from my own pocket. She caught her breath. "That's incredibly generous, sir. Would you like to put your name on the scholarship?" "No," I said. "It should carry hers. The Ellen Monroe Memorial Fund. Nursing students only. And it stays anonymous." "Understood," she said softly. "I think she'd be proud." "So do I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure. Pride wasn't Ellen's currency. Kindness was. I'd never been as rich in that as she was. That evening, I took the folder marked M and T. Harris loan out to the back porch. The Pacific wind was sharp, pushing at the corners of my flannel shirt like a reminder that summer had truly ended. In the metal fire pit sat yesterday's newspaper, the headline still visible. Under review, I added the folder on top. Receipts, screenshots, printed emails, proof of betrayal, proof of resolve. One match, one flick of my wrist, and the paper curled. The ink turned liquid, then vanished. Each sheet folded inward on itself, whispering into smoke. When the last ember died, I sat back and watched the night reclaim the yard. The ocean murmured beyond the dunes, steady, forgiving, infinite. I woke early. The porch boards were cool under my slippers, the air heavy with salt. A line of pelicans drifted low over the water, their wings barely skimming the surface. I made coffee, the good beans, the kind Ellen used to splurge on, and poured it into the chipped blue mug she loved. On the kitchen table lay the deposit receipt from the scholarship fund, stamped and sealed. I folded it neatly and tucked it into the cedar box that had once held Ellen's jewelry. It fit there perfectly. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel empty. It felt measured. Every silence accounted for, every ghost cataloged. Justice hadn't made me happy, but it had made things level. Somewhere up north, Melissa would wake up in a smaller house, maybe a rented one. She'd pour her coffee, check her phone, and remember what she'd done, not to me, but to herself. That was punishment enough. As for me, I sat on the porch, the sun climbing slow over the gray horizon, and thought of Ellen. I poured the last inch of bourbon from the bottle she'd hidden behind the flower 10 years ago, lifted it toward the ocean, and said quietly, "Here's to bridges that held." The wind chimes stirred once, soft and bright. I smiled. It wasn't triumph, not really. It was lighter than that, something smaller, quieter. It was my name clean again.